Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is time for another little extra episode, a little addendum, where we get to look now not at the commanders, more, possible commander combination. Yes, it's time for a second of those videos, but sort of go through what kind of commanders could you possibly put together, what side of combination, what sort of strategy are you playing. I mean, again, commanders are very much a way to sort of augment your strategies, augment your playstyles into something that more benefits you. And again, as always, the primary rule of thumb when you're going through is not what everybody else says. It's basically going through every single damn commander and then going, will I be using that ability that's actually present here? Will I be using them? If not, I mean, if you can actually not say that with a lot of them, you probably shouldn't go with them. Or if you think you can actually try and work your way towards using them, you can work. But, if not, don't. I mean, don't go so, well, I get this doctrine with a really big gun. I'm not going to actually use the rest of the doctrine, but, it's got a really big gun. Don't do that. That's just terrible. Again, you get more power actually out of having something you can use with more width, with more breadth, than you do with just a big gun. Though I won't deny, fun. Big gun can be fun, but it's more fun if you can actually use something besides the big gun. Surprise, surprise. Let's first have a look at a few Soviet commander combinations. I mean, this is one that I'm rather looking at using myself while playing as the Soviets. Guard motor coordination tactics. And it's quite a nice one. It got T-34, Mark vehicle guards rifle, heavy mortars, vehicle crew repair training. I mean, in many senses, it's a very solid commander. It, offers quite a bit. It's quite varied, and again, it's one you can rather, pull out if things are going a bit wrong while you're playing as the Soviets. Then you got the Soviet Reserve Army. It's more, your infantry doctrine. You get some irregulars, which again you can use to provide backup for rest infantry, conscript repair kits, conscript assault packages, rapid conscription, heavy mortars. It's essentially a bit like, the conscript support tactics, just actually adding in some new units and some artillery. So you get a bit more fun out of that way if you're, for example, not that much into Cindy artillery or, hit the dirt. In that case, Soviet Reserve Army also works nicely. Always those little things to keep in mind. And of course, we've got the counter-attack tactics right here. Adds in a bit more firepower. That's the more, alright, I really want to, strike hard at my enemy. I want some shock troops. I want for Mother Russia, which again will boost your troops. This time it's been changed a bit, so you don't have to pay as much munitions. You don't get as much of a bonus, but not as much as a penalty either, so that works nicely. You still get the KV-1 tank. You still get some artillery. So in that sense, I mean, we've got one more focus of infantry, but again, all of them also, at least for me, have some sort of infantry weight. Again, I'm very much an infantry commander. That doesn't mean, of course, I neglect tanks, but, it works. And again, in that sense, that's a lot, the strength of a lot of the Soviet doctrines, I mean, at least, is, again, they can add in some infantry and some armor, whereas with the Germans, you usually force out into one extreme. Although, again, there are some that go against that with later additions. So, for example, that's one commander sort of, initially put up here. Then, for example, we have a reasonably similar one. A bit more of an armoured one. We got guard motor coordination tactics again. Works nicely. Then Soviet industry tactics. Yes, you might wonder why we're using it on my primary commander, but it's not that it's not quite my playstyle. Again, as I've told you, I'm more of an infantry commander, so this is a bit too much in the armour end of things. I don't that hard focus on armour. It's not usually my playstyle, and usually I don't want to hurt my infantry while doing it, so this is not quite my kind of doctrine, thus not. But again, for if you want really something that focuses on armor, Soviet industry tactics is nice. Mechanized support tactics, adds in a bit of something else. It adds in a bit more long-range firepower. It's also got the bombing strike, anti-tank gun, ambush tactics, and still got the guards rifle infantry. So again, still got a bit of infantry, but also a bit of a punch. Of course, you can augment this with some other things. You might throw in some armored assault instead, if that is more your thing. And of course, you can also throw in the shock motor or the shock rifle. I mean, they are also quite valid options. Then we have something, a bit more infantry playing. Again, counterattack appears again because you got from Mother Russia, shock troops, the howitzer, recon overflight, all that can actually work quite nicely towards infantry. You've got conscript support tactics again, rather similar to reserve or army, but again, unlike, but with not irregulars and not the howitzer. So again, bit more supportive, bit more further focused on the conscript. Of course, here actually appearing with the defensive tactics, always handy and dandy. And again, can also work quite nicely with the infantry because again, you can quickly pop out some things, and for example, that way, not necessarily so quickly bother with buildings. That, of course, is another little possibility. Of course, there are many other variants. Of course, you could, for example, throw in Pardzin, that in essence was also be, rather infantry-like. I mean, it's a fun doctrine again if you know how to use the partisans, and in that sense, you could easily throw that in instead if, for example, you don't feel, about one of the defensive, or perhaps you don't quite like conscript support or counter-attack tactics. Again, partisans, if you're more towards harassment, that kind of play, and just having afterwards the partisans provide support, then again, this can also work out great. Again, there's always possibilities, always permutations, changes, whatever. Again, the important question is you're going to ask yourself is ultimately not, why did Dane suggest this? It's also, well, Dane did suggest this, but will I actually be using any of this stuff? Or I'm just, using it because he said it was totally cool. Which, I mean, I'll admit it's really a grand idea to just go for something because it's cool, but I think it'll be even better if you actually use it because you think it works. Same here, I mean, shock army, a bit more, bit of a mix, bit of infantry, bit of this and that. I'm trying actually throwing in some of my stuff I might not use much. NKVD, Rive Disruption Tactics. I'll admit it's not really one of the strongest, but still, I mean, it's got its options. It's got Radio Intercept, Rapid Conscription, Recon Overflight, Fear Propaganda, woefully underused ability, and Storm Mix. But again, I just threw that in just for the hell of it, I'll admit. Again, Guard Motor. Again, it's a very versatile commander. It's probably one of the strongest Soviet commanders, to be honest. And of course, Shock Rifle Frontline Tactics, but again, throw in something else. You could, for example, also just have a doctrine again focused on one particular type of infantry. I mean, that's also a possibility. And again, it works with the bulletins because there are some that are quite focused on certain units. And again, pop those in which case it doesn't make sense, for example, not to have that particular infantry available as any option. I mean, for example, again, you got, I'll just pop over here, but again, you got several doctrines that are focused on the shock troops, in which case, it doesn't make sense, to only have, for example, one commander that actually offers it, and the rest, for example, focuses on guards, in which case, why did you go for that then, Boris? I have no idea. So, again, keep those things in mind. Keep those things in mind. And then again, we actually get to see the Armament Assault. We get Guard Motor again, yes. I suppose I'm not being frightfully creative, but again, we can always throw in something else, get a bit of variety. All of a sudden, there we got something a bit more in terms of defensive play. And I suppose, again, do you want a defensive doctrine? So, of course, that's a bit more tricky because, and again, that's also something some Soviet players seem to forget. The Soviet army isn't really that, oriented towards big defensive structures. Again, it's more minefields, anti-tank guns, flanking the bastions, those crushing. It's not much, large fortified complexes. In particular, not for 1944-45. And again, there are some who apparently will never grasp that. I agree for them, but again, that's the truth. You can, of course, augment it, with anti-tank guns, mines, and all that. But again, ultimately, you are going to have to realize, you're not playing as the Germans or the French. So, again, don't expect miracles. But still, these simple things can work quite nicely. Again, both defensive, obviously, since they both, involve defense, so very defensive in mind. You can easily throw in, for example, one of the infantry ones. For example, anything with rapid conscription can essentially also be used a bit more defensively. Reserve army works handsomely towards that. Soviet combined arm, maybe a bit. I suppose you could even throw in partisans again, use them to ambush the attackers, for example. Could work. And again, also remember the partisan troops can lay down mines. So again, there's an option there. And ultimately, again, the important thing is here, what will work for you. But let's pop over to the Germans. And this is rather my current primary build as the Germans, mechanized assault, elite troops. German mechanized, of course, I'm constantly shifting things out, as I, for example, have new ideas. What will I want to use? What could I use? Do I actually want to use this? For example, again, I've currently got mechanized assault. Elite troops, I'm thinking about actually shifting out towards something I'm a bit more comfortable with. Again, the Tiger Ace is... Again, I'm not 100% always sure it's worth it, but again, you also got the stun grenades, troop training, pacification, Jägerlight infantry, so in a sense it works, but again, I'm also thinking, for example, popping back in Jägerlight infantry with its relief infantry and all the other fun bits. But again, it's more towards my infantry play, again, with a bit of a dash of armor. As that is ultimately all what this is about, although mechanized is surprisingly quite mechanized. Little infantry, you only got the mechanized grenadier group, otherwise more support, supporting your armor and vehicles with command tanks and spotting scopes and smoke bombs, but that can also work quite nicely if you can actually handle it. So that's also, a viable option. Popping out to this on the 18th Panzer Grenadier Division, you've got festering armor, lightning wall, assault support. Again, another sort of variation on that mix, but again, festering armor, obviously more armor oriented and also a bit more defensive. So again, in that sense, you want that defensive option, but you still want some armor. Then festering armor is, quite a choice. You could also go for fortified armor, though. That's obviously a little less defensive. It doesn't quite offer the Pack 43, which is ultimately much stronger on the defense than the Elephant, simply because the fact it can shoot for anything. Plus, you get the railway gun. That's always nice. But again, that's an opportunity as well. Again, you get Lightning War, you get Assault Support, always quite handy, can be used offensively. Defensively, it's pretty good. If you're not sure of the situation, go Assault Support. And of course, there's always the Artillery Field Officer. Yeah. So that's a bit of an option there. Of course, you could also say, I want something that keep me supported while things are going on attack, or something like that, or I want something else, go Luftwaffe Supply. It works. But then again, you might say, I want to focus on my armor, Dane. Show me something that, really gives me most out of my tanks. Again, Mechanized Assault, again, it works quite nicely with a lot of things. Again, it does have a lot of infantry, but again, it also has, some armor, something that works towards it, but not obviously augmenting the rest of your armor. So again, if you want that, of course, there are options. It says Blitzkrieg, if you're more towards that. You get Reconnaissance, you get the Panzer, you get the Command Tank. That is one option. There are other options, of course, if that is not quite your thing. Festering Support, I suppose, with the smoke bombs and its mortar half-tank can keep things going in that direction. That could also work. Festering Armor, again, also works in that direction if that's more your thing. Also, again, the more defensive of the armor doctrines. So again, ultimate question, will you actually be using it? If so, go for it. If not, no. But again, then you got Spearhead. Again, that's more the aggressive of the armor doctrines. You got still some of the things that'll make your tanks. You got fragmentation bombs. It's very much about spotting the bastards, clearing them out with either mortar or fragmentation bombs, then rushing in the Tiger tanks. And again, German mechanized works quite nicely. I mean, you could use Jaeger armor as well, but in that sense, I mean, if I have to choose between the two, I mean, I'm just going for that one because it's going to do a lot more for me than that one with the Regal Mines and the Elephant. And this one, on the other hand, offers command tanks, spotting scopes, smoke bombs, and the Grenadier Group already something that overall works a bit more towards mechanized and armored operations. At least in my opinion. But again, you could say, I'd rather want this. In which case, you go for it. If you're more the infantry player, then you actually got the German infantry doctrine. It's offers the officer, relief infantry, tactical movement, light artillery, fragmentation bomb. It's obviously also very munitions-heavy doctrine, so that's also something to keep in mind. But again, if you're comfortable with it, go for it. But again, it can be used that way, both offensively and defensively. You got Jaeger infantry. Obviously, you can't talk infantry combinations without Jaeger infantry. It offers ambush camouflage, the Jaeger upgrades, all that. Quite handy. And of course you got the Ostturm, also quite strong with trenches, artillery officer, lots of Ostturm, redistribute resources, railway artillery support. But of course there are other things that can sort of be used that way. For example, you could try and pop in Storm Doctrine, though I'd not really recommend that. I mean, in fact, elite troops, again, it works surprisingly well as an infantry doctrine. I mean, let's say, something that goes for either way generally depends on how many abilities rather works towards it. For example, you've got stun grenades, Jaeger upgrade, and troop training, which of course can also work some armor. But again, in that sense, I'd say it's an infantry doctrine, or at least it has strengths within it. But again, troop training also works to vehicle as Panzer, Tiger Race. It can also be an armor doctrine. So in that sense, it's a rather varied one in some regards. But of course, also, if you really want to use it as armor, it's also quite prohibitively expensive. So that, of course, is also something to keep in mind. But again, it can work in many regards if that is more your thing. And of course, I suppose, again, you can throw in, mechanized because, hey, it's got stuff going for it. And then finally, we got, a more, defensive play. We've got the defensive doctrine up here with its own trenches, fortifications, hold down, pack for the fleets, sector artillery. And of course, I mean, you can't also talk defense without going festering support. Also has sector artillery, relief infantry, smoke bombs, mortar half-tank, light artillery. Also quite handy on the defense. And of course, again, Ostturm also can be used quite handsomely defensively, again, if you know how to use it. So, some options. Again, all considerations sort of you can take into, how you play the game. So, that is, for example, how I view you can sort of put together some combinations. And again, there are many more variations. You can, for example, check streams, check different players' replays. I mean, of course, a lot, they'll go for the bog stand. Of course, those are a bit dull, in particular, since those that go for them also tend to be not very good use for the doctrines. But again, rule of thumb, best rule of thumb I can say is, again, go through every single ability in a command and go, will I actually be using this? Can I imagine a situation where I'll be using this? If yes, go for it. So, there you go. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got some ideas. I hope you learned something from it. If you did, tell me in the comments. Also feel free to share with friends. If you didn't, also let me know, then I'll stop making those videos. But this is Imperial Dane saying, cheers.